but I am saying that I don't believe much of it is ever going to address the root cause, because the root is always energetic. This is the Energy Within podcast, helping you to embrace your weirdness, find the confidence to be your true self, and fully step into your soul's purpose. My name is Carrie Jokala. I am your host. I am a Reiki master teacher, a fitness instructor, a wife, a mom to 2 little boys, and this is episode 156, and of course, still recorded on my iPhone, but not in a car this time, so no bumpy road to try to listen to me over, and really shouldn't be any background noise except maybe the occasional sip of coffee that I might take because I am alone in the house for just a little bit longer today. And I feel like I sound like I just woke up, even though I've been up for a while. But I also slept in a little bit, which still really wasn't sleeping in because I think I had my snooze going for about 2 hours. And my snooze goes off every 5 minutes, or at least it's supposed to. So I wasn't really sleeping, but I was resting at least, which I needed. So I feel good, even if my voice sounds a little weird. And I'm also really excited because I just won a spot in this group coaching thing, which I think was only given to a handful of women. So I'm super excited. And that's given me a little boost of energy right now too. But today's episode is once again probably going to be just a shorter chat. What's been interesting is as I've begun teaching Reiki, and I'm going back and rewatching the Reiki classes that I was a part of when I was learning Reiki, just to see again, since it's been a couple of years, of course, how my teacher ran the course. And then I'm also seeing and hearing things again that I either missed a little bit of or just didn't remember. And I'm also actually finally getting around to reading some of the books that my teacher had recommended during that class. Now, I did read one of them pretty early on while I was still in Reiki classes. And then I did buy another one as well that was kind of a Reiki for beginners book, which I actually still think is really good for reference, even at master level. But there are other books that I had written down and just never got around to buying. And I'm finally getting around to some of these books, and one of them is the Book of Chakra Healing, which kind of came back into my awareness at a perfect time because right before I watched the class where my teacher had recommended this book, I received a download about something that I'm going to put together, which feels like it's meant to be pretty big. And it's going to deal with one specific chakra for a specific, pretty large purpose. So I don't want to give away too much because I haven't put it together yet. And I also know that I have promised a couple of things in the recent past that I have yet to deliver on, one of which is an emotional health meditation. And the only reason I haven't done that is because I also got a bit of a download on how I'm supposed to deliver and create that particular one. And for that, I need the right music for the meditation. So I'm going to have to do a little bit more digging. And ideally, that's something I'd like to record when I don't have the kids around. But anyway, as I'm reading the introduction to this book, the author says, why should we want to utilize a system that is rooted so far back in time? Because the chakras and all of these ancient teachings go back so many thousands of years, and there's so much that seems to have changed and been updated, especially by this point in time. So naturally, she asks and then answers the question, why should we want to utilize a system that is rooted so far back in time? And what relevance does it have to living in this day and age? And specific to the chakra system that she's talking about, it takes a complete view of human experience, she says. It integrates the natural tendency for equilibrium into the many layers that make up the self, the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Chakra healing is based on the belief that in order for total well-being to take place, we must act as an integrated whole. So she goes on a little bit more, but I stopped there and I kind of went into a little bit of a daydream because my brain just ran with that topic of going back to some or many of the original practices that used to exist for us as humans until things started becoming updated and modernized. And I don't know exactly how I want to explain this, because my point here is not to say that anything that's updated or new, anything technological or medicinal advances and things like that, that they're necessarily bad or that they shouldn't be used, but just to talk about how fast-paced everything has become and how we keep feeling this push that everything has to evolve and change all the time, and it has to happen quickly. Because the other thought that gave me a little bit of pause with this is when I was learning a little bit more about how our body works in phases and how our nutrition should go in phases as well. There's talk there about how our bodies, our metabolism, our brain, all of these human factors of us haven't really evolved, at least not at the same pace that technology has clearly advanced around us. So our body's emotional response can still be at the same level of there's a saber-toothed tiger hiding in the bush waiting to kill me, when all that really happened is someone dropped a fork on the floor and it scared you. But our body might react at that same heightened level, and in some cases that can cause issues because we can end up constantly overreacting. It can cause our hormones and other things in our body to be out of whack if we're living in this constant heightened state of fear and anxiety. So the argument was that we should be adjusting the way we approach, how we eat, how we look at our nutrition, how we deal with our bodies. And I think it's an interesting concept to talk about, because while on one hand, I agree that as we learn more, as we understand more, it can be very true that we had certain things wrong, and now we've got them right because we understand more. And one good example there that I do subscribe to is this idea of calories. Supposedly, the idea of calories was figured out, I'm probably going to get this a little bit wrong, but something about burning a food to ash and determining either how long it took or how much energy it took to burn that food to ash. And why that was even accepted as a good idea of measuring how our food affects us really no longer makes any sense, because we don't burn food to ash inside of us. It gets put to use or it goes to waste, depending on what it is, depending on how our bodies are functioning, depending on what our bodies need. And just those 3 points right there, and I'm sure there's plenty of other factors, but just those 3 points right there should make it obvious that everyone is going to be different. So something as simple as an apple is going to affect me very differently than it might affect you. One person might use up the energy from that apple faster than somebody else. And it's going to depend on a variety of factors. So the idea of calories, in my opinion, is something that is very outdated and probably shouldn't be used anymore. I do think since it's something most people tend to understand the idea behind, it can be a good starting point if you're unsure of how to I guess, regulate, for lack of a better word, to regulate your food, what you're eating, how much you're eating, but it shouldn't be something that we use forever. I think the goal is to learn eventually how to eat intuitively, how to listen to our bodies, how to understand how our bodies react and use different foods. And when we stop using processed food, it actually becomes easier to listen to how our bodies are reacting to our food. And that's the basic idea behind the rest of this, going back to the chakras and going back to using more, for lack of a better word, ancient practices for healing, because I feel like in many instances we had it right. And while there are many advances that are helpful and are currently helping people, at the same time I believe that our bodies and our spirits, our energy, all has the ability to fully heal without outside help. This might get confusing, but I'm just going to keep talking. I do at the same time believe, if you go back to, I want to say the second ever interview I did with Janessa Finley, the one on blood labs, that we can reach a point where things get so out of balance that we do need some help to bring it back. Because the other underlying problem here is, I think, our belief in our ability to do it ourselves. So whether it is something more Western that we turn to help us, whether it is something more spiritual and energetic that we turn to help us, going to somebody like me who does Reiki or some other type of energy healing, I do believe it's necessary, because our confidence in ourselves, our belief in ourselves, and our natural abilities has been widely squashed. So we may need some help to bring it back. But ever since the world shut down, and we all know why it shut down, everyone talks about resetting things, about a new normal, because people argue that things shouldn't go back to normal as in how they were right before everything shut down. And my most updated argument is that, yes, there's plenty that needs to change, but maybe we need to search back a little bit further in our history to find what our new normal should be. And maybe it needs to be an older normal. And you can look at something like how fast technology continues to advance. And it just keeps getting faster and faster. It's a little ridiculous to me that something like a TV that's only a couple years old can now be that outdated. And for example, due to an app update, this TV will no longer support Hulu, which may or may not be a real life example. But things like that, things move so fast, and as much as I do enjoy the connection that has come from social media and all the good things that have come out of it, it's also created artificial connections when we need real, in-person human connections. It's just not the same when it's all online, and in a sense, in that way, almost all a little fake and imaginary. We can't deny that it's so different talking to people in person versus being online. I once, years ago, connected with a friend of a friend on Facebook, and we started chatting a lot, and she and I were both like, wow, did you feel like, I feel like we instantly connected. I just feel this connection with you. And I'm like, yeah, I feel it too. And then she lived, I think, in a different state at the time, but was coming back to around here, which I believe was her hometown. And we decided to meet up and go to lunch. And it was a good time, but it did not feel the same. And our chats afterward kind of faded a little bit. And I don't think on purpose, but it was just so different being there in person versus talking online. And I'm sure there are plenty of situations where it can be just the same meeting in person as it is online, but not always. And that's just one example. But let's tie this together. So looking at how slowly anything about us physically, mentally, emotionally as humans, how slowly that has all changed, and in essence basically hasn't changed, but how fast everything around us is changing. And I'm not saying that technology and whatnot is the main cause, but I'd be willing to say that it's a huge contributing factor. Look at mental health these days and how many of us are constantly stressed, how many people have anxiety, how many people have depression, how many people are struggling with just so many mental health issues. This becomes so common. And I said this a few episodes ago, common does not make something normal. Just because something has become more common doesn't mean it's normal and that it's supposed to be happening to us. So we need to look at why it's happening, and we need to get to the roots of why it's happening. And I 100% believe that it is energetic first. Anything that manifests physically, emotionally, mentally, has an energetic root. That doesn't take away from the reality of what's going on physically or mentally or emotionally, but I believe we need to go back to dealing with the energy body and the reality of how integral that part of us is in our whole health, rather than just masking and even replacing certain things with synthetic creations. Because I believe in the long term, all that's going to do is make our bodies go, oh, I don't have to do this anymore. And again, go back to that blood lab episode with Janessa Finley. Same idea. If your body realizes that it doesn't have to do anything anymore because it's being created a different way, it just won't make it anymore. To really get your body to fix it, we need to figure out the source. And it may not always be the same source for everybody. And that's why we need to get back in touch with our intuition. We need to slow down. We need to learn how to listen again, because it's all there. The answers are all there. We're just so distracted, and we're so crowded with everything that we are told that we have to do, that we have to think and feel and experience and do and be. And all of these things get labeled alternative health, which is weird because these are the things that have been around forever, and now all of a sudden they're the alternative. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying that any of these updates and advances that we've had are bad or wrong or shouldn't be turned to ever, but I am saying that I don't believe much of it is ever going to address the root cause, because the root is always energetic. So I think that's all the points I wanted to hit about this. I hope that this made sense, and I hope that it was helpful. This turned into a bit of a longer chat than a shorter one. But if you did find it helpful, if you enjoyed it, I would love you forever if you shared it and tagged me on Instagram or even Facebook. If you tag me on Instagram, make sure you tag I am Carrie Jokala. That is my newer one, and the one where I've been doing all of my posting from. And sharing about the show just helps it to reach more people, helps it to grow. So I truly appreciate from the bottom of my heart anytime you share the podcast in any way, even if it's just a one-on-one in person or sending a text to somebody that I'll never see or know about. If you feel so called to write a review, those help as well. Even just a star rating, if you want to give me 5 stars. Please give me an awesome 5-star rating and perhaps consider leaving a review. Stay tuned for this chakra healing program that I'm going to be putting together. And in the meantime, as always, I invite you to come do a Reiki session with me. You can check out information and testimonials and pricing and see the calendar on my website, carriejokala.com. And of course, you always have the option also for an Akashic Records session, which gets even more involved. A Reiki session is going to be a little bit more gentle. Not that an Akashic Records session is rough, but things can be a little bit more blunt, and you have much more involvement in the session when it's Akashic Records. So if you've never done anything like it before, I would recommend a Reiki session to begin. And there's also oracle card readings if you just want a quick confirmation or validation of if you're on the right path, where you're headed, getting a couple of answers to what's going on. So you can find those options on the website as well. And then, of course, make sure that you hop inside the Energy Within Facebook group. And make sure you answer the questions so I know that you are a real person who actually wants to be in this group. And that's where I'll leave it for today. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time.